Hey guys, this is attorney Chloe Corbett, aka the Duchess of Justice, and with me I have
Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice.
We are the Defiant Lawyers. We provide legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you to defy this unjust legal system. Before we get into today's topic, please, why don't you hit that like button, whether or not you're watching from Facebook, from YouTube, on our podcast. Please share this live stream and subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more videos to come. With that, Dad, happy Thanksgiving, and how are you doing today?
I am doing well, Chloe. Thank you for asking, and happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Your mother cooked a very delicious meal, as always. And
she really did.
She did. And we are today beginning to eat. It's always been a tradition for her to make turkey salad after a couple of days of eating the turkey. So now we're feasting on the turkey salad.
Yeah. And the greens that she made were absolutely scrumptious.
Scrumptious, that's right.
They were just so good. The seasoning, everything was seasoned right. It was just amazing. The stuffing was good. Where we're from North Carolina. We call dressing stuffing, and Texans call it dressing. But the dressing / stuffing she made was amazing, and so was the turkey.
Yes, it really was, as well as the sweet potato pie. I told her, I've been since last year, as you all know, I have been trying to eat better and eat right, and I haven't had a sugary drink since last Thanksgiving, and I have seriously curtailed all types of sugars, no cakes, no cookies, none of that. But I did splurge a little bit with this sweet potato pie that she made this year. Did y'all get some?
We didn't get a piece, sadly, but I will be probably coming by sometime this weekend to get a piece of the pie, because the pies are amazing as well.
Yeah, they are. And this time, since she couldn't find any pie crust in the store, so much stuff was sold out, she made homemade pie crust from scratch, believe it or not.
Wow, look at that. Okay, I'm definitely going to stop by and get a slice. I've been, on my health kick as well. I've been, eating healthy, not eating a lot of sweets, but I am definitely going to make an exception for Thanksgiving.
I'm sorry. So just go ahead. Don't let me disturb you. This is live TV.
This is live, where we are our own production team as well as the co-host of this show. But we're going to be talking about something that came down that we are very happy that happened, and that was the guilty verdicts in the Ahmaud Arbery murder trials. All three men who were accused of Ahmaud on 27 total counts, they were found guilty of murder. There were various differences in the way that they were found guilty, but we're going to be talking about that today and analyzing it in detail. So Travis Mcmichael, his father Gregory Mcmichaels, and William Bryan were all found guilty of murder. Travis Mcmichael was found guilty of all 9 counts of murder and other charges. Those counts included count 1, which is malice murder. He was found guilty of that. Counts 2 through 5, he was found guilty of felony murder. Counts 6 and 7 were aggravated assault. He was found guilty of. Count 8 was false imprisonment. And finally, count 9 was criminal intent to commit a felony. Travis Mcmichael was found guilty of all 9 of those counts. His father, Gregory Mcmichael, was found guilty of 8 counts, but he was not found guilty of the malice murder. And William Bryan was found guilty of 6 out of 9 counts, including felony murder, as well as one of the aggravated assaults, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. So those are the verdicts that Glenn County jury found after listening to 2 weeks of evidence and testimony. How do you feel about it, Dad?
I'm relieved. Let me put it that way. I'm relieved. Justice was served in this case. As a criminal defense lawyer, I can't sit here and say that I am elated that anyone is going to be spending the rest of their lives in prison. I'm certainly not happy at the murder, the lynching, I would say, of Ahmaud Arbery and the suffering and pain and trauma that his family and friends are feeling. And the only way we can't bring him back, unfortunately, he should have been sitting at the turkey table yesterday with his family. But sadly, he won't come back to them. So the only way to get some semblance of justice in this case was for the jury to return the guilty verdicts that they did. And I want to say, you and I did a previous video where we said that we did not think that this jury would find these men guilty, a jury that consisted of 11 white, 1 black person. And someone may say, well, do you all want to apologize? Absolutely not. This country has a very rich and deep and long history of all white juries, or nearly all white juries, exonerating white people, white men particularly, for killing black men. And so anyone in their right minds would have been just as skeptical of what this jury would do, because all they needed to do was find one person, just raise reasonable doubt with one person. And a little bit later in this video, I'm going to explain to you why I believe all 12 of these jury members found these men guilty of all or most of these charges. I'm going to tell you why. Despite all the racism that we saw in this trial, I'm going to explain to you precisely why they had nowhere else to go with this verdict or with these verdicts. So no, we don't apologize for being very skeptical of a jury that consisted of 11 out of 12 white jury members in a Southern Confederate state where the victim was black and the perpetrators were white. That is a not guilty verdict every day and has been for years. This was the exception. So
It was. And no, I agree with you. We did not apologize whatsoever. The way that this legal system in this country has been over the past several hundred years, this truly is an exception. And my heart goes out to to Ahmad's family. I heard his mother give an interview, Wanda Cooper Jones, and this will be the second Thanksgiving that Ahmad would not be sitting at that Ahmad was not sitting at the dinner table with them for Thanksgiving. But she said this would be the first Thanksgiving where justice was served, and now Ahmad's soul can rest in peace. So all of our thoughts and prayers go out to his entire family and his friends. And right now we want to analyze, how do we get here? How do we get to the point where a Glenn County jury found 3 white men guilty of committing murder and murdering Ahmaud Arbery? So let's go. So
Chloe, can I say one other thing before you get started?
Sure.
Another reason why we're not going to apologize is because this would have been covered up had it not been for the video and some very good prosecution. We'll get into all that later. But this was going exactly the way that these types of cases tend to go. We had a racist criminal justice system there in that area that was trying to hide this, cover this, lie about this, protect the Mcmichaels and Mr. Bryant. But they couldn't, because a video surfaced. Okay. We thank God for videos. And it just so happened that one of the defendants actually took that video. But I just want to throw that in. So no. Anyone who was skeptical about whether or not this 11 out of 12 jury members would find these white men guilty of killing a black man in the South, no, especially when they tried their very best to cover it up. Okay, just wanted to throw that in, Chloe.
Yeah, that skepticism was warranted, and we don't apologize for it at all. We are happy with this verdict, and we do think that justice was served. So, how did we get here? First, let's talk about the Arbery family. Ahmaud Arbery was a 25-year-old black man who, last year, early 2020, before the pandemic started, he was out jogging, and he was jogging in the Scintilla Shore area neighborhood in Glenn County, Georgia, when all of these events happened, and he was murdered in broad daylight in the middle of the afternoon. His mother is Wanda Cooper Jones, and she has been fighting relentlessly since his murder for nearly 2 years to get justice on behalf of her son. And keep in mind, and I'm going to go through this timeline later, but it took almost 3 months for these men to even be arrested because of a lot of foul play with law enforcement and with the district attorney's offices in that area. So his mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, she really fought hard to get justice for her son, as well as his father, Marcus Arbery Jr. His father was involved as well, and their entire family have been seeking justice relentlessly since February of last year. So let's talk about the defendants, the murderers, the convicted murderers at this point. The first is Travis Mcmichael. He is the son of Greg Mcmichael, and Greg Mcmichael was a former police officer in that area and a former investigator for the Glenn County District Attorney's Office. He actually worked there from 1995 until 2019. So that kind of tells you how ingrained he was in that district attorney's office, in law enforcement in that area, and likely why it took so long for him to even be charged for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And like I said, he was the father of Travis Mcmichael, who was, as he testified at trial, a former Coast Guard mechanic. And he tried to get into why his quote unquote expertise as a member of the Coast Guard, why he needed to use force in self defense and make a citizen's arrest of Travis Mcmichael. Excuse me, of Ahmaud Arbery. And obviously, that jury did not buy their citizen's arrest defense or self defense as well. And then finally, we have the last defendant and convicted murderer, William Roddy Bryan, who lived in the area, who was one of the participants who shot the murder on his cell phone, and who supposedly, according to reports, is the one, or his attorney or someone on his behalf, released the video, which is what led to them finally being charged. Now let's go through the prosecutors, because there have been a lot of district attorneys on this case. And one of those former district attorneys, Jackie Johnson, has actually been indicted and arrested for various felonies related to her alleged mishandling of charging Ahmad's killers. So the third district attorney who actually brought the charges was District Attorney Tom Durden. And it was his office who prosecuted this case finally. And it was led by Special Prosecutor Linda Dernikowski. And I hope I'm saying her name right, because she did a brilliant job in trying this case and presenting this case and weaving all of the facts and combining that with the law to present a very compelling case against these defendants. Now, let's get into what happened with the attempted cover-ups, in our opinions, with these district attorneys. So, Ahmad was shot and killed on February 23rd, 2020. And the very next day, February 24th, 2020, District Attorney Jackie Johnson recused herself from the case. And the reason why she cited that she recused herself is because Greg Mcmichael was an investigator in her office. So the very next day, she recused herself. And then she sent a letter a couple of days later to the Georgia Attorney General's office, on which she requested that a new prosecutor be appointed on the case. So even though she recused herself the next day, it's reported that she sent a letter a few days later and then requested that the Attorney General's office appoint a new prosecutor on the case. At that point, the new prosecutor on the case, the second prosecutor on the case, was District Attorney George Barnhill. However, he recused himself about a month and a half later in April because he informed the Attorney General's office that he had his own conflicts of interest. He claimed that his son had worked with George Mcmichael in helping prosecute Ahmaud Arbery for some juvenile charges. But here's the thing. He didn't request to recuse himself even after he knew the conflicts of interest until Ahmad's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, requested that he recuse himself. That is being reported. So even though he allegedly knew about these conflicts of interest, it was not until Ms. Jones requested that he recuse himself that he finally did, and he made the Attorney General aware of these conflicts of interest. And in fact, what came out later is that supposedly DA George Barnhill, the day after Ahmaud was murdered, police officers from Glenn County reached out to him to ask his legal opinion about whether or not they should charge the Mcmichaels for the murder. And it's reported that a letter he wrote to the police stated that the Mcmichaels' actions were, quote, perfectly legal.
Wow.
I mean, that is just amazing.
Wow.
And
wow,
then
wow.
perfectly legal. This was the day after Ahmaud was shot and killed by the police. And then in a subsequent letter to that, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported, and I'll quote, that DA Barnhill said this family, and he's talking about the Mcmichaels, this family are not strangers to the local criminal justice system. Excuse me, he's referring to Mr. Arbery's family. He says, quote, from best we can tell, Ahmad's older brother had gone to prison in the past and is currently in Glen jail without bond, awaiting new felony prosecution. It also appears a cousin has been prosecuted by DA Johnson's office, end quote. So he was trying to do what happens in a lot of these cases, which is to attack the victim's family, and use that as an excuse why the Mcmichaels should not be prosecuted for murdering Ahmaud. That all of that didn't come out until way later, until a couple months after he was appointed by the Attorney General's office. So the Attorney General, they released him, and finally the case was transferred to a third DA who I mentioned earlier, Tom Durden. And it was under his prosecution where Special Prosecutor Lena Dernikowski took the case on and presented it, what we've seen over the past 2 weeks. So let's go through the facts about what happened, what came out in trial, the evidence, etc. On February 23rd last year, 2020, around 1 p.m., Ahmaud Arbery was jogging through the Centella Shore neighborhood in Glenn County, Georgia. And evidence presented at trial included a 911 call made by one person in that neighborhood who called 911 and reported that someone had gone into an open house in the neighborhood. And if you listen to the recording, you can hear the dispatcher ask this person, was this person who they apparently saw, was that person breaking in? And the 911 caller said, no, it is an open house. Okay. This was all around the time that Mr. Arbery was jogging down the neighborhood. And then testimony came out that Greg Mcmichael subsequently called 911, and he reported that he saw Ahmaud running down the street. Okay, he said that he saw someone running down the street. At this point, it's not clear whether or not he knew it was Ahmaud, but we learned later at trial that it was Ahmaud. It was then he and his son, they grabbed their firearms, they get in a pickup truck, and they pursue Mr. Arbery.
Chloe, hold your thought right there. Hold your thought right there. I want to just let our audience know, let the rebels know what we're doing here. A lot of times folks base their opinions on these types of cases on sound bites from the media. What we've done is we have studied, we've watched video, we've researched so that we can give folks more information and more of a context so that they can understand the backdrop of this trial, so that they can, whatever they feel about it, they can know that it is an informed decision. It's not just based on sound bites or what the media wants you to know, whether that media is CNN, whether it's MSNBC, whether it's Fox News or whatever. We want you to have more than just a 2-second soundbite. So that's why we're going into this information in some detail. All right. So, Chloe, I just want to throw that out just in case someone was saying, okay, why are you all giving all this information? Because we want you to really understand the facts and the law with this trial. All right, go ahead, Chloe.
Yeah, and we want to put you as much as possible into the mind of the jury who listened to all of this evidence and all of this testimony and got a comprehensive timeline of what happened. We were not made aware, the general public at large was not made aware of this until May, almost 3 months after Ahmad was murdered. And it was based on a 35-second video. And so we've done our due diligence in reading news reports, listening to the evidence at trial. I'm looking at the exhibits as much as possible to put together this timeline of what exactly happened when Ahmad was murdered on February 23rd. Because a lot of what was put out into the public was just based on that 35-second video, which was pretty damaging by itself. Just like we said earlier, without that video, I strongly believe that the Mcmichaels and Mr. Bryan would still be walking free today, because it would have been the word of 3 white men versus 1 dead black person. So after Mcmichael, the elder Mcmichael, called 911 without having seen Ahmad, having anything in his hand.
Chloe, could you repeat the name of that third prosecutor who was trying to cover things up, just so folks can understand?
Yes.
Jackie Johnson was the first one. It
was the second prosecutor, George Barnhill, who really tried to cover everything up, in my opinion.
All right. George Barnhill, you said, right?
Yes, George Barnhill.
And who was the first one again?
Jackie Johnson.
Okay, Miss Johnson here. And the other prosecutor, George Barnhill, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that everyone is up with you. All right, now go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you.
Thank you. I'm trying to make this as clear as possible because there's a lot of facts to go through. And it was the third prosecutor, Tom Durden, who actually oversaw the prosecution of these men. So after Greg Mcmichael called the police, if you listen to Travis Mcmichael's testimony, he testified that his father let him know that he saw someone running down the street. They grabbed their firearms, they hop in their pickup truck, and they pursue Ahmad as he's jogging. They follow him. And that's when Mr. Bryan then comes, and he's in a second pickup truck, and he is behind the pickup truck that the Mcmichaels are in. The portion of the video that we see, the Mcmichaels are in a pickup truck at the front. Greg Mcmichael, the father, is in the back of the pickup truck, and Travis Mcmichael is on beside the driver's side. And then you can see Ahmaud Arbery run into frame as he's trying to get away from these men. That is when in the video you can see that there's a tussle. Because as one police officer testified, he was a prosecution witness. Travis Mcmichael told that police officer that he aimed the gun at Ahmaud Arbery as Ahmad was trying to run away. So a tussle happens. Ahmad is trying to get free. And then that's when Travis Mcmichael shoots Ahmad 3 times. All the while, William Bryan is recording that portion of what happened. And him and Greg Mcmichael closed Ahmad in with their vehicles. So that is where we get these felony murders, because they were committing felonies, blocking him in, the aggravated assault, using their vehicles to block Ahmad in, trying to trap him, almost like someone would trap a rat. And then,
in fact, that's what one of them said.
yes, they literally testified to that. And then Travis Mcmichael was the one that pulled the trigger. And I believe that is why the jury found him, and only him, guilty of malice murder, committing a homicide with malicious intent. And we'll get into the particulars of Georgia law later on how they define malice and malice murder and citizen's arrest. But because he pulled the trigger, because he was the one that tussled with Ahmad, he was found guilty of malice murder. And then his father was found guilty of felony murder and all of the other counts. And then Mr. Bryan was found guilty of 6 of those remaining counts. So this is what led to Ahmad being killed on a February morning of last year. And this is the information that the jury heard through the testimony and through the videos that were presented at trial. I mean, just think about that. Ahmad is running down, jogging, running outside, something that I do, something that millions of Americans do. And he is trapped by 3 men in 2 pickup trucks. And subsequently has to fight for his life, in which he's ultimately shot 3 times and succumbs to his injuries. I can't imagine how Ahmad felt in those last few seconds of his life. And I think that is what the jury was thinking. Because even though the jury was made of 11 white jurors, most of those white jurors were women. And I can assume that a lot of them may have been mothers, maybe even grandmothers, nieces, daughters. And I think that may have helped the prosecution as well, having those women listening to what happened to Ahmad, looking at Ahmad's mother, who was sitting in the courtroom nearly every day during the trial, and putting themselves in her position.
Wow. So, I mean, you just laid it out for us. Are you finished? Is there more?
I just want to go back and highlight just the intentional way that officials in that area were trying not to charge the Mcmichaels, especially because of Greg Mcmichael's connection with the district attorney's office. He worked for the district attorney's office for over 20 years. The Glenn County Police Office reached out to him. Reached out to George Barnhill, the second prosecutor, and asked for his legal opinion. And it's reported that he said that what the Mcmichaels did were perfectly legal. I mean, to me, that is horrendous. That the very person, the district attorney, who the citizens of Glenn County elected to provide justice on behalf of its community, said that the actions of these convicted murderers were, quote, perfectly legal.
You being a former prosecutor, how does that make you feel?
It's disappointing, because it goes against what I was taught when I was a prosecutor, which is that we are to seek justice first. Here in Texas, we're not taught to seek convictions. We are taught to seek justice. And in my mind, justice is finding the Mcmichaels and Mr. Bryan guilty for murdering Ahmaud Arbery. So the fact that the elected official, the district attorney, the person who oversees all of the prosecutions in Glenn County, opined that what the Mcmichaels did was perfectly legal, it's very disappointing as a former prosecutor.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to hear from you because you have that prosecutorial background, and I can only imagine because you were taught to be people of integrity. Although there have been many prosecutors, as we see, who have been very, very, very anything but integrous, right?
Yeah.
So again, thank you for laying that out the way you did. We've gotten some commenters to join us, some of our audience. Hello to Rodney Williams. Thank you for joining. So I guess at this point, Chloe, I will start giving a little bit of what I heard in the closing. I watched the state give its closing. I also watched a lot of the direct and cross-examination to the state's case and the defense's case. And before I get into the closing, in fact, let me say that this had to have been the most racist defense that I've heard or seen in my lifetime. And I'm going on 60 years old. I heard somebody say this morning there were all kinds of dog whistles that the criminal defense lawyers were using. And I said, no, they were not dog whistling. A lot of people may not know what a dog whistle is, but when I was a kid, we used to buy dog whistles, and they were these silver whistles that you could blow, and they would make a sound that was at such a frequency that only dogs could hear the sound. People couldn't hear them. And so this dog whistle, metaphor is intended to convey that things are said that communicate certain things to white people that other folks don't quite get. Well, these criminal defense lawyers were not dog whistling. They were outright racists. Outright racists. Kevin Goff, who started out by expressing objections to the black pastors, not pastors, to the black pastors, and asked everybody what they thought about if Colonel Sanders showed up in his white suit and white hair and so on. The same Kevin Goff who said there need to be more uneducated white men, middle-aged white men on juries, what he said are bubbas. These are not dog whistles. And all of that after they successfully excluded nearly every black juror in the jury panel. And so after they picked this 11 out of 12 white jury, then their strategy was to say things to incite those 11 white jury members. They knew their case was weak. They knew the facts were against them. They knew the video was bad. They knew the law was not on their side. So they went to that old reliable strategy, racism. Overtly, not dog whistles, overtly. I mean, we are criminal defense lawyers, and we go hard for our clients. We go hard for our clients. I even gave Kevin Goff a little leeway, even when he said when he wanted the black pastors excluded, because I could see in a trial where if people were coming in, and it looks like their presence could have some interference or some sway on the jury, we would object. So I gave him that. But that was just one comment of many that were inexcusable. And I think probably the most inexcusable comment of them all was the comment made by criminal defense lawyer Laura Hogg, who referenced the toenails of deceased Ahmaud Arbery. She must have made those comments based on, my presumption is, based on autopsy photos. As a criminal defense lawyer, I could not make heads out of tail of how that would help her client, other than she simply thinking that those 11 white jury members would take that statement to mean that this was a dirty, filthy black man, like I heard somebody say, like a runaway slave, that you all do not, you jury members, you white ones, you all do not have to be really concerned about how he died, even why he died, because he's a dirty, worthless, filthy blankety blank. There's nothing that justified that.
That's the exact imagery that came in my head when I saw that she described Ahmad's toenails like that. Runaway slaves, the feet of our ancestors who had to literally run for their freedom away from these slave owners. And I think that's why it was just so offensive to a lot of African Americans in this country, because of the visceral, invisible imagery that it put into our heads. It was just disgusting.
It was disgusting. It was horrific. And then think about the fact that his mother and father were sitting in the courtroom when that comment was made. They tried to make him sound like an animal, like he was worth even less than an animal. All again to try and connect with those jury members, them thinking that those jury members are white like we are, so these comments will surely resonate with them. Now, Kevin Goff's comments were made outside the presence of the jury, but Laura Hogg's comments were made to the jury, directly to the jury. She knew what she was doing. So let me now start getting into some of the closing arguments. And as I do, I'm going to answer the question that Mr. Williams raised. He said, I think they are guilty, being that Mr. Arbery gave the gun the same as the guy in the Rittenhouse case. Why was that not considered self-defense? Was it because they trapped him in? I think he is asking Arbery. I'm not sure I understand this question. Maybe you can rewrite it, Mr. Williams. I think I know what you're asking, but I'm going to answer why self-defense was not effective here. I'm going to answer that generally. But if you want to rewrite your question, I may be able to get to it specifically. So first, the prosecution, they always or have the right to go first in their closing. And listen, closing arguments is when you just let it all hang out. I mean, you're arguing. You're arguing. You are making inferences. I mean, you are doing what you need to do at that point to try and get that not guilty verdict. So it can be a full contact sport, no question about it. So I expected the defense to go all out. But the prosecution's closing argument was brilliant, very effective, and she did it with precision. I looked at every minute of it. So the first thing I want to do, Chloe, as I get into her closing argument, because she focused on two things. She focused on why Georgia's old citizen arrest law was not applicable in this case. Now, when I say applicable, it was the law at the time of Ahmaud's murder. They have since repealed it, is my understanding. But it was applicable when this unfortunate murder, lynching, occurred. So that was where they hung their hat. They were making a citizen's arrest of a man who had been in the neighborhood potentially stealing, although there was no proof that he stole anything, okay? But they were using that as a defense. So let's look at what Georgia's old citizen arrest law actually says. That this citizen's arrest law does not help the defendants for one primary reason. And William Bryant did not witness in their immediate presence. I'm getting some information here that folks can't hear me. I hope you all can hear me okay.
Yes, please let us know.
Yeah, I'm getting some indication that you all can't hear me. Please let me know.
Can you all please comment below if you can still hear us?
I'm going to go ahead like I'm assuming that they can hear me. We see from the video, Chloe, I see. Okay, when I put up the arrest law, my audio goes silent, so I won't put it back up. We've read it. But in that law, it says that whoever's trying to make a citizen's arrest must must see the person committing a crime in their presence or in their immediate knowledge. The video showed clearly that those three men had not witnessed, and the testimony that came out, and by their own admissions, they did not see Ahmaud Arbery commit an offense in their presence or even within their immediate knowledge. And the prosecutor was very skilled at bringing out and pointing out and boxing the jury in. If they did not witness Ahmaud Arbery committing a crime, now they can try and make him look like a criminal. They could say he stole something last week. They could say he stole something 3 weeks ago. They could say he stole something yesterday. But if they don't see him actually in their immediate presence committing a crime or within their immediate knowledge, there is no citizen's arrest. Therefore, everything that they're charged with, they are guilty of, unless they can try to prove self-defense. But citizen's arrest is off the table. Unless there is evidence that they knew that he was committing a crime in their immediate knowledge. Now, I know you can't hear me when I bring up the law, but I'm going to bring it up again because I want you all to see it. So there it was. They got to see him commit a crime. They did not see him commit a crime. They made assumptions. They presumed that he was committing a crime because, as the prosecutor said, here they see a young black man running in their neighborhoods. And they got after him. No one. Go ahead, Chloe.
I was going to say, and they targeted him because, remember, Greg Mcmichael reportedly had been involved in the previous prosecution of Ahmad. So he already linked Ahmad as a criminal. So even though he didn't see Ahmad commit any crime when he murdered Ahmad, because of his previous connection with Ahmad in the legal system, he immediately just assumed, just like you were saying, that Ahmad had committed a crime, even though he had not witnessed it in his immediate presence.
Thank you for bringing that out, because that is a critical point. Because the defense team thought that if they told the jury about that Ahmad had been in that house a couple of times, things had been stolen from that house, that Ahmad, they didn't put like his record in evidence, but they went all around it. They suggested, they inferred it.
Yeah.
And they thought that the white jury members would get it. That Greg Mcmichael, Travis Mcmichael, Roddy Bryant were protecting their neighborhood from this dangerous, dirty, filthy black man. So whether they witnessed the crime or not is not important.
Yeah.
They were protecting the neighborhood from this guy who probably had been stealing.
Who invaded our neighborhood.
Laura Hogue brought all of that out in her closing. That this was a great neighborhood. It was a beautiful neighborhood. People trying to raise their children. And listen, I don't begrudge or bedevil a defense attorney for going hard for her client. We do it all the time. We would have gotten into all of that, except the racist stuff, except the dirty toenails of a dead man. What does that have to do with anything? But anyway, back to the prosecutor. She boxed him in, and she made it clear, Chloe, based on what you just said, that the jury could not use this excuse of him possibly being someone had stole something, possibly someone who had been prosecuted and targeted by Greg Mcmichael or whoever. The citizen's arrest law require that you see that he commit a crime in your immediate presence or in your immediate knowledge. They could not put forth that evidence. Therefore, she stressed citizen's arrest is off the table.
Yeah.
Now, the defense lawyers do what we defense lawyers do. We can't just sit there and drop our heads and say, okay, that's the end of it. We got to get up there and we still got to fight back. So they got up and fought back, and they tried to twist the law, and they tried to, again, tap into that racist sentiment, okay? They knew the law. You know, there's this old saying, when the law's not on your side, argue the facts. And when the Facts are not on your side. Argue the law.
Argue the law. We taught that in law school.
Absolutely. And when the law or the facts are not on your side, just bang on the table. And in their instance, bang on the table and get racist.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
Yeah.
And they literally thought that it would work. All right, now, self-defense. Prosecutor said no, self-defense is not good either for a couple of reasons. Number one, Travis Mcmichael was the initial aggressor. And I'm quoting her almost verbatim. Number two, Travis Mcmichael provoked the incident. And number three, Travis Mcmichael was committing a felony. So under Georgia self-defense law, it doesn't apply. Because you can't, and that was the point I was making about Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay? He was, which is true under Wisconsin law as well. If you are the one who gets the stuff started and then you shoot somebody and claim self-defense, you got it started. And so the Georgia statute said no, if you are the initial aggressor, if you provoke the incident, and if you're in the process of committing a felony, you have no self-defense. So, Mr. Williams, Mr. Rodney Williams, that is the response I have to your question as to why self-defense didn't work here, because under Georgia law, Travis Mcmichael did not have that defense because Travis Mcmichael was the initial aggressor. He provoked the incident. He was committing a felony. When they got in their pickups and they started chasing him down and trapped him like, quote, a rat, close quote, they can't then come back and say that this is self-defense. Ahmaud Arbery, can you imagine, as you said earlier, Chloe, the last couple of minutes of his life? He's out jogging, 2 pickup trucks with 3 white men get behind him, one in front, one in the back, or both. I think they both were behind him. And 2 are armed, one with a shotgun, one with the pistol. And the defense kept, I'll come to them in just a minute.
And this goes to show too that, and you made a video, our last video is why we are strong proponents of the Second Amendment. But it goes, when you shoot your firearm, you better be ready for the consequences, whether or not you believe you acted in self-defense or not. Period.
That's right. That's exactly right. You better know. You better know before you release, before you, just what you said, Chloe, fire that firearm, because there will likely be consequences. Folks will be looking at what you did and parsing it under the law.
Yes.
Okay. All right. The state went on to say that Ahmad was not the initial aggressor, as the defense would argue, because there was 3 against 1, she said. There were 2 pickup trucks, 2 guns, and Ahmad was alone and unarmed.
Just look at how simple those facts are, how she clarified and brought all of those facts in her closing in front of the jury. It was 3 against 1. There were 2 pickup trucks, 2 guns, and Ahmad was alone and unarmed. I mean, she brilliantly, out of all of that testimony and evidence, threaded those 4 critical facts together and presented that to the jury.
Now, and she anticipated, obviously, where the defense was going to go. She went first, remember? So she had to, say what she needed to say in anticipation of what she knew they would say. And sure enough, when Travis Mcmichael's attorney, let me see if I have, yes, right here, Travis Mcmichael and his attorney, when he stood up, first they started trying to certify or qualify Travis as an expert.
I don't know if they can hear us when you put up the picture.
Oh, man, I hope they can. Wow. Wow. I hope they can. So um, at any event, they tried to certify Travis Mcmichael. They tried to certify Travis Mcmichael as an expert since he served in the Coast Guard. They also, his lawyer, Travis McMichael's lawyer, also discussed how they had this ideal neighborhood, but it became dangerous and filled with crime. Again, trying to tap into the fear of those white jury members. White fear is very powerful. It's irrational. I mean, think about it, Chloe. Why would 3 men in pickup trucks, 2 armed, be afraid of this skinny little black kid who had nothing? And as Laura Hogg said, he was even barefooted. So what was this one? If they fear black men that much, wow. I mean, wow. 3 white men, 2 armed, feared this one skinny little black kid who didn't even have on socks, according to Laura Hogue. What could he possibly do to them? But again, white fear is very powerful. Mm-hmm. White fear is very powerful. He also, Travis McMichael's lawyer, tapped into vigilantism. And he kept reminding the jury that it was these men, it was their duty to protect their community. It was their duty to protect their neighborhood. Because you got these people. And in Ahmaud Arbery's case, he kept saying something just didn't seem right about him. Something just didn't seem right about him. Something was off. I mean, just sort of tapping into the fears and the racism of some whites, white suspicion.
It reminds me of the slave patrols that would occur, which is where the citizens arrest law comes from anyway. Anyway, when there was not, police forces in early American history. So the writers of these laws, they wanted to give citizens the authority to arrest people. But really what it was used for was to round up runaway slaves, to patrol African Americans, etc. And so, I mean, this old Civil War era law is what led to them becoming convicted murderers. And it goes into the vigilantism, this thought that we have to protect our communities, that our communities are becoming unsafe and filled with crime, that we have to take the law into our own hands. That's the imagery that it puts in my mind. And I think the prosecutor again kind of weaved at how that's not applicable. It doesn't apply in this case. Ahmaud Arbery was just jogging through the neighborhood. He did not pose any threat to anyone at that time.
And he had not committed any crime in anyone's presence or within anyone's immediate knowledge. So they were not entitled to make a citizen's arrest. But the defense team, they knew this, so they kept trying to tap into all of the white fears and suspicions and white vigilantism. I wrote these notes down as I heard Travis McMichael's attorney make his closing. I said, this lawyer is making the type of argument that whites would understand when deciding if 3 white men are guilty for killing a black man who was merely suspected of being a criminal. They made an argument that white people in that situation would understand. And they knew they were making that type of argument. In other words, it would sound very hollow to any other person other than a white person who has deep suspicion and bias and prejudice toward black men. They would get what this lawyer was saying. Others would say, this is offensive. The young man was jogging down the street. He didn't deserve to die for that. Now, that was Travis Mcmichael's, the gist of his lawyer's closing argument. Let's talk about Greg Mcmichael's lawyer, Laura Hogue. And there she is. Her defense was nonsensical. Not only was it nonsensical, it was offensive. It was just offensive. She is the woman, she is the lawyer who said that he had dirty toenails. There was an open gasp in the courtroom. You could hear it on TV. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I were listening to the closing argument ourselves, and we couldn't believe our ears. And she asked me several times, what did she say? And I said, she said exactly what you can't believe she said. She referenced this kid's toenails.
And the way she said it, you could hear kind of the disgust in her voice is how I would characterize it.
Exactly. Thinking that it would resonate with those white jury members. But the prosecutor had so boxed them in. They were boxed in tight. She had a tight rope around them because since they didn't witness him committing a crime, there was no grounds for citizen's arrest. And since they were the aggressor, since Travis Mcmichael was the aggressor, he provoked it, he was committing felonies, they didn't have self-defense against this kid who was unarmed, alone, on foot, by himself, jogging. And
you know what Ahmaud Arbery's mother said in response to Laura Hogue's mentioning his long, dirty toenails? She said, well, what that he didn't mention was the bullet holes in his chest either in her closing. And to me, that was powerful.
It really was.
So you want to focus on the long, dirty toenails, supposedly, but not the bullet hole that your client put in his chest.
Exactly. I mean, that is the mindset that someone could say, well, she was just doing her job as a defense lawyer. No, she was not. There's no ethics rule, no law of rule of evidence or anything else that says you go racist when you're defending your white client for killing a black man. She was not doing her job. No, she wasn't. She said Ahmad died because he wouldn't wait on the police. Now, he didn't have to wait on the police. They had no right to stop him, to try to force him to talk with them. He had the right to defend himself and stand his ground just as much, more so than they did. They didn't have the right to do it because they provoked it. So the law was completely and totally on his side and in support of him, not waiting for the police. Why do I have to wait for the police? I mean, who are you all? You're just vigilantes.
Who are y'all?
Who are you? Okay. And then finally, there's Kevin Goff, who represented William Roddy Bryant, the same Kevin Goff who referenced black pastors, Bubba's, and all of that. And by the way, one of these gentlemen had a Confederate flag on the front of his truck. And they called, I forgot to mention this, they also called Ahmaud Arbery that colored fella. That colored fella. Okay? And a rat. Kevin Goff essentially argued or tried to argue that his client had really nothing to do with the murder. That he was just there as a spectator, basically. He was not with them. He didn't have a firearm or any of that. So, the jury took some of that in consideration and only found him guilty of 6 out of 9 of the charges. But they did not buy most of that argument. And the evidence showed that this was essentially a conspiracy to commit murder. And I'm sure Mr. Bryant wished he would have just stayed home. Whatever he was doing, just stayed on the porch, kept eating, watching TV, or whatever it was, I'm sure. Because this went in a terrible direction. Young man lost his life. Their lives are forever changed. Everyone involved. And then, of course, the state got a chance to do its rebuttal. It was about a 2-hour rebuttal. And she just kept reinforcing how the citizen's arrest law was not applicable, nor was the self-defense. That this was murder. Pure and simple. Pure and simple. And the jury heard her. She did a very good job boxing them in. I don't see where they could have gone anywhere else but guilty. She had so boxed them in. Between the law and that video, it would have been a travesty on the level of Emmett Till. Now you think about murders like Trayvon Martin. The difference, the big difference there, you still had this vigilantism, still had this unarmed, innocent black kid. The difference with that case and the Ahmaud Arbery case is there was no video in that case. There was nothing to tell Trayvon's side of the story.
Exactly.
In this case, although Ahmad is gone, there was a video that told his side of the story.
Taken by one of the murderers.
Taken by one of the murderers. Yes. And so despite all the attempts to cover this up by these people, Jackie Johnson and Barnhill, it didn't work because of the video. So if there's anything I would leave with any of you, when you're dealing with the police, or when you see another African-American person dealing with the police, safely and cautiously pull out your cell phone and start getting the video. You don't know how important that video may end up being. I say do it safely. Don't give them the excuse to say you were reaching for a gun or something. Do it safely. Do it cautiously. Because it may really make all the difference in the world. It made the difference in the George Floyd case. We all saw that. Now I go back in the mid-90s, Chloe, when you were just a little bit of girl, and back to the Rodney King case. We saw that beating. Those men were exonerated. Okay? We saw Tamir Rice. We saw Eric Garner. We saw Walter Scott. We saw Philando Castile. We saw the Crutcher man out in Oklahoma. We saw the man, I can't remember his name, in Florida, who was lying down with his hands up trying to keep one of his mental health patients calm, and he still got shot. We saw those videos as well. And I'm coming to a close. There are a lot of people who are taking these verdicts, and they're saying, okay, the system has changed. No, it has not. People say that are people who don't work in this system every day. And they don't have experience with this system who say that kind of thing. It hasn't changed. It's working the way it was designed. Again, the only reason these men were found guilty is because of the video, which enabled the prosecutor to argue an airtight case. Had there been no video, these three men would have gotten away with lynching Ahmaud Arbery.
I agree. That video changed the game. And once it was leaked to the public and the pressure that the public put on those officials to do what is right, that is why the video was instrumental as well. As we come to a close, I do want to talk about, well, what happens now? Those three men are convicted murderers. And under Georgia law, a person convicted of the offense of murder shall be, and I'm quoting from Georgia Code 1651, that person shall be punished by death, by imprisonment for life without parole, or by imprisonment for life. So the jury, it did its duty. It reached a verdict, and now it will be up to the judge to decide whether or not they will be in prison for life without parole or for life with parole. I read that the judge, he will give his sentence in a couple of weeks. So we'll be on the lookout for that, for whether or not he sentences them to life without parole or life with parole. My guess is that Travis Mcmichael will be given life without parole, and that Greg Mcmichael and William Bryan will be given life with parole, which is basically a life sentence, because I think Greg Mcmichael is 65 and William Bryan is in his mid-50s. So that is where we're at now. They're also facing felony prosecution hate crimes that is set to go to trial, I think, January.
You said felony, but I think you meant federal.
I meant federal. Federal hate crimes prosecution that's set to go to trial either in January or February of 2022. They're also facing life in prison with those charges as well.
So, yeah, I mean, it was a fateful day, not only for Ahmad and his family, but for the Mcmichaels and Mr. Bryant and their families as well. I'm relieved that go back to what we said in the beginning, I'm relieved that we got guilty verdicts in this, but I don't celebrate any of this. Is a tragedy all the way around. There are no winners whatsoever. Obviously, young Arbery didn't win. His family didn't win. His friends didn't win. But also the Mcmichaels. And I heard Ahmad's mother bring this point home. No one has won. The Mcmichaels' families are devastated with their loved ones now facing imprisonment for life. I guess I go back to what Dr. Martin Luther King said. We must learn how to live together as brothers or perish as fools. I mean, it's just sad all the way around.
It is. It truly is. And like Miss Cooper Jones said, Ahmad's mother, you know, Ahmad can't be brought back. And the McMichaels have lost, what, 3 generations of people in their family, because she was being asked whether or not we should pray for the McMichaels as well. She said yes, because we've lost a generation with the murder of my son, but the McMichaels have lost 3 generations as well. So it really is a tragic day, and I can't wait for the day where America can truly has this reckoning of race in this country. Because once and until we have that reckoning, I believe that things like this will continue to happen, and we can't truly move forward and be the ideal nation that we have in our constitution and our laws until we have that day of reckoning, until the government truly apologizes for the way that it brought black people into this country, for the things that it did against Native Americans and other minorities, so that we really can achieve the ideals that we've set in the fabric of this country. But you can't do that until you reckon with it, until you fully and truly acknowledge it, until you repent of it, as Christians like to say when we go to God and we know we've done something wrong and we want his forgiveness and ask for his forgiveness. We have to repent of the wrongdoing, of the sin that we did. And America needs to repent of the tragic sin of racism in this country.
Yes. And repudiate it, repent of it, and repair the damage.
And repair. Yes.
That
yes.
This racism has done. Let's shout out a couple of folks who joined us. By the way, we don't see all of the trolls that was with us last time. I guess this case was so strong, there was nothing to troll us about here, but we do see several rebels here. I'm going to try to pronounce this name, Connie Cachette. That looks to me like that is a Jewish name, a Hebrew name, Cachette. I'm probably
Greek, maybe.
Huh?
I was thinking maybe Greek.
Yeah, I kind of think a Jewish surname. But anyway, she brings out the point, a good point. She says a 9-to-5 mechanic in the Coast Guard trying to be certified as an expert with arresting people. Oh yeah, I'm right. Ms. Cachette says it is Hebrew. Yes, I thought so.
Oh, okay.
I thought so.
Nice.
And Alicia thought we did a great job, made some great points, great presentation and discussion. Thank you, Alicia, very much.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you.
So I think that brings us to the end of this. Chloe, is there anything that I am forgetting that we need to say?
That is it. That is it. Justice was served in our mind in this case, even though it is a tragic case all around, with the many generations of people that would be affected for life. But we know that the jury in this case listened to all of the evidence and came down with their verdict. We'll be keeping watch of what the judge decides for punishment for the Mcmichaels and for Mr. Bryan. We'll also be keeping up with the federal case that is against these defendants as well. And just stay tuned. Stay tuned. We're going to be addressing trending politics, policies, trending personalities, and pop culture, and giving you all legal analysis so that you can take this information into your everyday life, into the education system where you're fighting for your children, into the health system where you're fighting for your health or a loved one, into any area of your life where you feel like you've suffered an injustice. We want you to be able to take the information that we share with you and use it to fight for yourselves and for your loved ones. So that is our purpose. That's what we're doing as Defiant Lawyers and growing this rebel community. So we encourage you all to continue to stay with us, to stay tuned with these lives that we're doing, the other type of content that we have, the podcasts that we have. You can find us on any podcasting app at the Defiant Lawyers, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, as well as our website, which is the defiantlawyers.podbean.com. So we're so glad that you all have decided to listen to us today, to be a part of the Rebel community, and we're looking forward to the next video.
Well, aren't I one blessed man, one blessed father to have this beautiful daughter of mine with this brilliance sitting here with me and making this thing not only sound good, but look good. So proud of you, Chloe. And I got a little applause for you. Got to give it to you.
Thank you, Dad.
Got to give it up.
It's a pleasure to work with you every day. Seriously. Yes. You all enjoy the rest of your Thanksgiving break. Enjoy your family. Continue to stay safe in the midst of this pandemic. We love and appreciate you all. Continue to be blessed.
Peace. We're out of here.
Peace out.